Amara had been counting down the days to her mother's birthday with the kind of excitement only a daughter can carry. She was 16, soft-spoken but full of warmth, the type of girl who always put others before herself. Living in the busy streets of Lagos, life wasn't always easy, but little things like a family party meant the world to her. For weeks, she had been saving the little money she earned from helping neighbors with errands. Every time she passed the market, she stopped to admire a pair of earrings she thought would be perfect for her mother, Ngozi. She even practiced how she would hand the gift over, imagining the smile it would bring. At night, Amara would stand in front of the mirror, laying out her favorite dress, adjusting her braids, picturing how beautiful the day would be. To her, it wasn't just a birthday party. It was a chance to celebrate her mother, to show how much she loved her, and to feel part of something joyful after so many hard days. But one evening, just as Amara was humming while folding her dress, her mother walked in and dropped words that froze her heart. "Amara, the party is cancelled." "Times are hard," Ngozi said, her face unreadable. The earrings slipped from Amara's hand. For a moment, she wanted to ask why, to beg her mother to change her mind. But she swallowed her disappointment. If her mother said times were hard, then that was the truth. So Amara nodded quietly, hiding her tears, still trusting the woman she loved the most. The morning after her mother told her the party was cancelled, Amara tried to push away the heaviness in her chest. She told herself it was fine, that maybe next year things would be better. She focused on chores, humming quietly to distract herself, but her mind kept wandering back to the earrings wrapped in a small piece of cloth inside her drawer. They suddenly felt useless now, a gift with nowhere to go. Later that afternoon, while helping sweep the front yard, Amara heard her younger cousin, Ifeoma, whispering on the phone. Ifeoma was just 10, playful and careless with secrets. Amara wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words floated over, clear enough to sting. "Yes, the balloons came this morning. They're setting up the decorations at Auntie Ngozi's house." Amara froze, the broom pausing mid-sweep. Decorations? At her mother's house? That couldn't be right. Her mother had said the party was cancelled. She leaned closer, pretending to still sweep, but Ifeoma quickly lowered her voice and ran off when she noticed Amara nearby. Confusion twisted inside Amara. Maybe she heard wrong. Maybe it wasn't her mother's party. Lagos was full of celebrations, birthdays, weddings, naming ceremony. She tried to convince herself it was all just a mix-up, but the thought clung to her, refusing to let go. As the day went on, Amara started noticing things she hadn't paid attention to before. Her aunties spoke in half-sentences whenever she entered the room. Her cousins quickly changed the subject if she walked by. Even her sister, Chidinma, avoided eye contact and kept her phone pressed tightly to her chest. It was as though everyone was holding a secret, one they didn't want Amara to know. At first, she told herself she was imagining it, that her disappointment was making her paranoid. But the silence around her felt too heavy, too deliberate. Normally her family was noisy, loud with gossip and laughter, but now the air shifted whenever Amara stepped close, as if she had walked into the wrong room at the wrong time. That night, lying on her bed, Amara stared at the ceiling, her heart restless. She kept replaying her cousin's words about the balloons and decorations. She wanted to ask her mother again, but something inside her held back. What if her mother became upset? What if it really was a misunderstanding? Amara didn't want to appear ungrateful or suspicious. Still, the unease only grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind her back. The same house she lived in, the same people she loved, suddenly felt distant and strained. Her mother's words about canceling the party rang louder in her mind, but now they sounded less like truth and more like a cover. Amara hugged her pillow tightly, whispering to herself that tomorrow would make things clearer. Deep down, though, a small, painful voice had already started asking the question she didn't want to face. What if they didn't want me there? The next day felt unusually quiet for Amara. She tried to keep herself busy, sweeping, washing plates, even helping her neighbor buy vegetables from the roadside market. But her heart wasn't settled. She still couldn't stop thinking about Ifeoma's whispers, the strange silence from her family, and the way everyone seemed to be avoiding her. It was like a shadow following her everywhere. By evening, she finally sat on her bed and reached for her phone. She told herself she would scroll through social media to distract her mind, maybe laugh at a funny skit or watch a trending video. But the very first post she saw made her fingers freeze on the screen. There it was, her mother's birthday party. Amara blinked hard, thinking maybe her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the pictures kept sliding across her screen. Her sister Chidinma was there, smiling wide in a glittering gown, her makeup flawless. Her cousins were lined up beside her, laughing, posing as though the day was perfect. And right in the center was her mother, Ngozi, glowing with happiness. She wore a geli wrapped high on her head, the kind she saved for only the biggest occasions. The decorations were nothing small. The compound was filled with balloons, fairy lights, and fresh flowers. There was a DJ in the corner, people dancing, children playing. In one picture, a massive three-tier cake stood proudly on the table, decorated with gold and white icing. Everyone looked like they were having the time of their lives. Everyone except Amara. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mother had told her the party was cancelled. She had trusted those words, accepted them, even comforted herself by believing times were hard. But the truth was staring at her from the phone screen. The party hadn't just happened. It was big, beautiful, and filled with laughter, and she had been completely left out. Her hands shook as she scrolled through more posts, each one like a knife cutting deeper. Guests from the neighborhood had tagged the location, dropping heart emojis and comments about how wonderful the celebration was. "Mom Ngozi is glowing," one caption read. "Best party of the year," another person wrote. Even strangers were admiring a party that Amara had been told didn't exist. Her eyes burned with tears, but she couldn't look away. She searched every picture, hoping, just hoping, maybe she was there in the background, maybe it had all been a mistake. But she wasn't. There was no sign of her. It wasn't just an oversight. It was deliberate. Amara put the phone down slowly, her chest rising and falling as though she had run a long race. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit what she had been afraid to think. Her mother hadn't wanted her. The woman she loved and trusted had looked her in the eye and lied. She sat on her bed, staring into the darkness of her room, her heart breaking in silence. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion. It was real, and it was undeniable. Amara couldn't sleep that night. The pictures from the party kept replaying in her mind like a cruel movie she couldn't pause. Her mother's laughter, the guests cheering, the glow of the candles on the massive cake. It was all too clear. And in every scene, she was missing, like she had never been part of the family at all. By morning, her chest felt heavy, and she knew she couldn't keep it bottled inside any longer. She needed answers. When the house grew quiet and most of the relatives had gone, Amara found her mother alone in the kitchen. Ngozi was humming softly while rinsing plates, still looking cheerful, as if nothing had happened. For a moment, Amara hesitated at the doorway. She wanted to run back to her room, but the weight in her heart pushed her forward. "Mama," Amara began, her voice shaking, "why didn't you invite me to your birthday party?" Her mother didn't look up immediately. She continued washing the plate in her hand as though she hadn't heard the question. When she finally turned, her face was calm, almost too calm, and her eyes were cold. "You embarrass me, Amara," she said flatly. "I didn't want you ruining the party." The words landed like a slap. For a second, Amara thought maybe she had misheard, but her mother's tone carried no doubt. There was no hesitation, no regret, just a blunt truth that cut deeper than any lie ever could. Amara's lips parted, but no words came. Embarrass her? Ruin the party? She wanted to ask how. She wanted to beg for an explanation. But her throat felt dry, and all she could do was stand there, trembling, while her heart broke into pieces she didn't know how to gather. Her mother had chosen to celebrate with the whole world, but not with her. Worse, she had looked her own daughter in the eye and told her she wasn't good enough to stand by her side. Amara finally whispered, "But Mama, I just wanted to celebrate you." Her voice cracked, the tears she'd been holding back spilling over. Ngozi sighed, wiping her hands on a cloth, her expression still firm. "You wouldn't understand. Just leave it." And with that, she brushed past Amara, leaving her standing there alone, shattered. The silence that followed was unbearable. Amara's body felt weak, her chest tight, as if she had been struck down. The earrings she had saved up for suddenly felt like a cruel joke, sitting useless in her drawer. All the effort she had put into planning her outfit, all the excitement she had carried, it was clear none of it mattered. Not to the one person it should have mattered to most. That night, Amara curled up on her bed, crying into her pillow until it was soaked. She realized this pain wasn't just about missing a party. It was about something far deeper, the truth that her own mother didn't value her presence. That kind of wound cut straight to the soul. And though no one else could see it, Amara knew she would carry that scar forever. Amara spent the next few days locked away in her room. She avoided her cousins, her sister, even her friends who knocked on the door asking why she hadn't shown up at the party. She couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell them that her own mother had told her she was an embarrassment? The shame burned too deeply. At night, when the compound grew quiet, she cried into her pillow until her body ached. Her tears weren't just about the party anymore. They were about the cruel words that had cut her open. But slowly, as the days passed, something inside Amara began to shift. She realized that if she let the pain keep her down, she would only be proving her mother right. Her mother's words echoed in her head, "You embarrass me," and each time she remembered them, it stung like fire. Yet buried inside that pain was a spark, a stubborn determination she hadn't felt before. If her mother couldn't see her worth, then she would show the world. Amara had always loved cooking. Even before all of this, Neighbors often came by asking if she could bake a small cake for their child's birthday or help prepare jollof rice for a gathering. It wasn't a big business, just something she did for a little money here and there. But now she saw it differently. Cooking wasn't just a hobby anymore. It could be her way to rise, to stand tall, to prove she wasn't a disappointment. She threw herself into it with everything she had. From the little money she had saved, she bought flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. She borrowed old pans from an auntie who ran a canteen. Every morning, she woke up early to experiment with new recipes, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but never giving up. She decorated her cakes with care, even if they were simple. She cooked with so much love that her food carried a special taste people couldn't forget. Soon, word started spreading. A neighbor who bought a small cake told another friend. An auntie who had a small gathering recommended Amara. One by one, customers began to knock on her door, asking her to cook for them. Each time someone paid her for her food, it felt like a tiny victory, proof that she had something valuable to offer. Her evenings, once filled with tears, now turned into hours spent whisking batter and seasoning meat. The same girl who once lay broken on her bed was now rising slowly, not with noise or drama, but with steady, quiet strength. Deep down, Amara still carried the wound her mother had given her, but she was learning something powerful, that betrayal could either break her or build her, and she had chosen to be built. Instead of letting the pain destroy her spirit, she was shaping it into something new, something no one could ever take away. Amara's small catering hustle grew faster than she could have imagined. At first, it was just neighbors asking her to bake small cakes or cook rice and stew for gathering. But Lagos has a way of carrying news, and soon her name was being mentioned outside the compound. One customer led to another. A woman who ordered puff puff for her child's school party told everyone how delicious it was. A man who asked her to cook for his office staff kept bragging that the food finished before he even got a second plate. Word of mouth became her biggest advertisement. Before long, she started receiving phone calls from places she had never been to. "Amara, can you come to Abuja to cater for a wedding?" one woman asked. Another voice came from Port Harcourt, inviting her to handle a birthday celebration there. At first, Amara was nervous. Traveling out of Lagos for big events felt too big for her, but she reminded herself how far she had come already. If she could survive her mother's rejection, she could face any challenge. She worked tirelessly, sometimes sleeping only a few hours, sometimes burning her fingers while frying, but never slowing down. She saved every naira she earned, putting it carefully into a small wooden box hidden under her bed. She resisted the temptation to spend on new clothes or jewelry. Her focus was sharp. She wanted something permanent, something that would outlive the pain she carried. After months of hard work, Amara finally had enough to take a bold step. She rented a small shop near the market and turned it into her catering space. The day she opened the doors, with a painted sign that proudly read Amara's Kitchen, she stood outside and felt tears sting her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of triumph. She had built something from her tears, her sweat, and her determination. Her shop quickly became the talk of the area. Customers lined up to place orders for weddings, birthdays, church events, and corporate functions. Her cakes grew bigger, her meals more refined, and her reputation stronger with each passing week. Ironically, many of her extended family members, who once ignored her, now came knocking. Aunties and uncles hired her to cook for their events, bragging to their friends that their niece was the best caterer in Lagos. At family gatherings, people praised her openly, marveling at how much she had achieved in such a short time. But one person remained silent, her mother. Ngozi never mentioned Amara's success, never congratulated her, never admitted the pride others clearly felt. She would eat the food at events without saying a word, as though acknowledging Amara's talent was too heavy for her lips. Still, Amara didn't let it stop her. She had realized something important. She didn't need her mother's validation anymore. The same girl who was once hidden away had become visible to the entire community. Rising from the ashes of betrayal, Amara was no longer just surviving. She was thriving, and the whole world could see it, whether her mother chose to or not. A year passed, and life looked very different for Amara. Her catering business had blossomed beyond anything she once dreamed of. Her days were busy with orders, deliveries, and events that kept her shop buzzing with laughter and activity. People respected her now, even those who once overlooked her. But though she had grown stronger, the wound from her mother's betrayal still lingered deep inside, quietly reminding her of the night she was told she was an embarrassment. Then came another twist of fate. It was her mother's birthday again. This time, Ngozi wanted to celebrate even bigger than before. She had planned for weeks, calling vendors, hiring decorators, and booking a well-known caterer in Lagos. The whole family was excited, talking nonstop about the party that would outshine last year's. Amara, though, stayed in her lane. She listened quietly, but didn't involve herself. She had learned to keep her heart guarded. But just 3 days before the celebration, disaster struck. The caterer who had been hired called to cancel. Something about a double booking, an unavoidable mix-up. Panic spread quickly in the family. A big party without food was unthinkable. Relatives began calling each other, throwing out ideas, but time was running out. Who could cook for such a large gathering on such short notice? It didn't take long before Amara's name came up. One uncle said, "Why are we stressing? Amara is the best. Let her handle it." An auntie nodded in agreement. "Yes, her food is always perfect. People are talking about her everywhere. Who else can save us now?" Soon, almost everyone was suggesting her, their voices filled with urgency. But when the conversation reached Ngozi, her face hardened. The thought of handing the spotlight to the daughter she once excluded made her uneasy. She shook her head at first, insisting they would find someone else. But each alternative failed. No other caterer was available at such short notice. The clock was ticking, and the party had to go on. Finally, backed into a corner, Ngozi had no choice. With a reluctant sigh, she muttered, "Call Amara." Her tone was flat, but beneath it was something she couldn't hide. Hesitation mixed with pride she didn't want to admit. When Amara was approached, she paused. Part of her wanted to refuse, to remind them of how they once lied to her, how they laughed and danced without her. But another part of her, the stronger part, knew this was bigger than old pain. This was her chance to show not just her mother, but everyone, how far she had come. She agreed, not with bitterness, but with quiet confidence. In that moment, the tables had turned. The same girl who had once been hidden away was now the only one who could save the celebration. And whether her mother liked it or not, Amara was about to step into the center of it all. The day of the party arrived, and Amara was up before sunrise. She tied her apron tightly and set to work with a calm focus that came from experience. Pots of jollof rice simmered over the fire, releasing a sweet, smoky aroma. Trays of peppered chicken roasted until golden. Puff fried in bubbling oil, soft and fluffy, while fresh vegetables were chopped and seasoned for salads. She even baked a cake, simple but elegant, layered with buttercream that melted on the tongue. Her team of helpers moved quickly under her direction. Amara didn't shout or panic. She guided them with steady hands and clear instructions. Hours flew by, and by afternoon, the long tables at her mother's house were lined with food that looked as beautiful as it smelled. When the guests began arriving, the effect was immediate. Plates filled quickly, and soon the sound of satisfied sighs and cheerful chatter filled the air. "Who cooked this?" one woman asked, licking her fingers. "This is the best jollof I've tasted in years." Another guest praised the cake, saying it tasted like something from an expensive bakery. Everywhere Amara turned, people were smiling, eating, and going back for more. The whispers started to spread. It was Amara. She catered everything. Guests looked at her with new eyes, some even clapping her on the back, others calling her name with admiration. Aunties who once barely noticed her now sang her praises loudly, almost competing over who could compliment her the most. Children danced around with puff in their hands, and even the DJ gave a shout-out. Big ups to Amara's kitchen for this amazing food. Amara didn't boast. She moved gracefully between the tables, checking on trays, refilling plates, and smiling politely at every compliment. Inside, her heart swelled with quiet pride. She had come a long way from the girl who once cried alone in her room, believing she wasn't good enough. And then came the moment she knew was unavoidable. A guest raised his glass and said, "Madam Ngozi, your daughter has outdone herself. This food is perfection. You must be so proud." The crowd around them nodded, clapping and cheering, waiting for her mother's response. Ngozi's face tightened. She looked around at the guests, then at the long tables filled with food, then finally at Amara. For a second, it seemed like she might stay silent. But the room was watching, and the pressure was too heavy. With a forced smile, she said, "Yes, Amara did well." It was short, reluctant, but it was still an acknowledgement, the very thing she had once refused to give. The guests erupted into more applause, some even chanting Amara's name. Amara didn't gloat, didn't show anger, didn't even look at her mother for long. Instead, she simply bowed her head slightly in thanks and went back to serving. That was her triumph, not loud, not boastful, but powerful. The whole community had seen her worth with their own eyes, and no one could take that away again. When the party finally ended and the last guests drifted out, the compound grew quiet again. Empty plates were stacked on the tables, balloons drooped in the corners, and the music faded into silence. Amara stayed behind with her helpers to pack up the leftover food and clear the dishes. She moved calmly, her mind steady, though inside she knew this night was bigger than just another catering job. Her mother sat on a chair nearby, her belly slightly tilted after a long day, her eyes following Amara in silence. For once, the woman who always had something to say looked small, as though the weight of everything hung heavy on her shoulders. Family members whispered to each other in low tones, some stealing glances at Amara with new respect, others at Ngozi with quiet judgment. When the work was finally done, Amara walked over to her mother. She didn't raise her voice, didn't let anger lead her words. Instead, she spoke with the same calm that had carried her through the evening. "Mama," she said softly but firmly, "you once told me I would ruin your party. But today I made it unforgettable." The words hung in the air like a bell. There was no shouting, no accusations, just the truth spoken plainly. Her mother's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to respond, but no words came. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable, and for the first time, shame was written clearly across Ngozi's face. Amara didn't wait for an answer. She didn't need one. The silence itself was enough. It spoke louder than any excuse ever could. Her mother's refusal to deny it, her inability to defend herself, proved that deep down she knew the truth. The family who had once looked at Amara as if she was invisible now saw her in a completely different light. Aunties who had joined in excluding her clapped her back, telling her she had saved the day. Uncles nodded in approval, calling her a strong woman. Even her sister, Chidinma, who had once flaunted her spot at the center of the party, now looked at Amara different. Her pride softened into quiet respect. But Amara didn't linger in the praise. She simply straightened her apron, gave her mother one last steady look, and walked out of the compound with her head high. She wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. She wasn't the girl who cried herself to sleep in the dark. She was Amara, the young woman who turned betrayal into strength, rejection into triumph. Behind her, the whispers of the family grew louder. They were no longer talking about Ngozi's party. They were talking about Amara, the caterer, the businesswoman, the daughter who had proved everyone wrong without raising her voice. And though her mother's silence still stung, Amara knew this truth. The same family who once ignored her could never see her the same way again. Amara left her mother's compound that night with her head held high. She didn't stay to soak in the praise or wait for more applause. She didn't gloat or throw her success in anyone's face. Instead, she walked away quietly, her dignity intact, knowing her work had spoken louder than any words ever could. The same people who once ignored her now knew her worth, and there was no going back from that. Back at her shop, life carried on. Orders kept flowing in, her phone buzzing with new customers every day. Churches, offices, weddings, birthdays. Everyone wanted a taste of Amara's kitchen. Her little shop grew into a hub of activity, filled with the sweet smell of cakes and the rich aroma of stews and jollof. People no longer introduced her as Ngozi's daughter. Now they introduced Ngozi as Amara's mother. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The daughter her mother once tried to hide had become the pride of the entire community. Strangers admired her, neighbors respected her, and family members who had turned their backs now told her story proudly, as if they had supported her all along. And though her mother's betrayal still lingered like an old scar, Amara no longer carried the pain the same way. Instead, she carried the lessons. That wound had forced her to find her strength, to rise when she could have fallen. It was the fire that built her empire. Her story spread beyond her street, beyond Lagos, touching people who saw themselves in her struggle. Amara had become more than a caterer. She was living proof that rejection can spark greatness, and that sometimes the ones who try to silence you only end up giving you the loudest voice.